It was a Tuesday night, and the last thing on my mind was danger. My husband had gotten home early for once. Actually early, not the "I'm 5 minutes away" kind of early that turns into 40, and we decided to do something we hadn't done in almost 3 months. We called my in-laws. We said, "Come over." My mother-in-law brought her green bean casserole even though nobody asked her to, and my father-in-law brought a 12-pack of Modelo and that loud, easy laugh of his that fills up a room without trying. It was the kind of Tuesday that tricks you into thinking everything is fine. I remember standing at the stove, stirring the gravy, thinking that this, right here, was what I'd been needing. Not a vacation, not a spa day, not any of the things I'd been pinning on boards I never look at. Just this. My husband pouring drinks in the next room. The sound of a football pregame show neither of the men were actually watching. My mother-in-law sitting at the kitchen island, telling me a story about a neighbor's dog that had somehow gotten into their garage and eaten an entire bag of birdseed. I was laughing. My hand was on the pot. The kitchen smelled like garlic and something browning in butter. And then my phone, sitting face up on the counter, lit up. I didn't recognize the number. Area code 614, Columbus. I didn't know anyone in Columbus. I almost ignored it, almost. But something made me pick it up. I don't know what. Maybe it was the way the notification just sat there, blinking, patient, like it was waiting for me. The text said, "Don't react. Don't say anything out loud. Get your husband and walk out the front door in the next 4 minutes. Leave the others inside. This is not a joke." My brain did that thing where it just stops. Like a computer that's been asked to run something it doesn't have the processing power for. I read the message twice, 3 times. The words didn't rearrange themselves into anything less terrifying. Don't react. I set the spoon down on the rest. I didn't look up. I could feel my mother-in-law still talking behind me, still on the neighbor's dog, something about birdseed everywhere, and the husband's face when he found it. I made a sound that I hoped passed for a laugh. I didn't trust my face. I kept it turned toward the stove. My hands were shaking. I typed back one word. "Who is this?" 3 dots appeared. Then, law enforcement. Trust me, 4 minutes. Front door, quietly. I stood there for what felt like a full minute but was probably 8 seconds. The gravy was starting to stick. I moved the pot off the burner on autopilot, the way your body does things when your mind has completely vacated the premises. Law enforcement. Law enforcement had texted me from a Columbus area code on a Tuesday night while I was making gravy. None of it made sense, and all of it felt completely, horribly real. I turned around. My mother-in-law was still talking, gesturing now, her hands describing the size of the birdseed bag. My father-in-law's voice carried in from the living room. He was saying something to my husband about the quarterback situation. Whether the kid had the arm for it or not. Normal. All of it so normal. I walked to the doorway between the kitchen and the living room. My husband looked up when he saw me. We've been married 9 years. He knows my face. His expression shifted. Barely just a small tightening around his eyes. He knows my face. "Hey," I said. "Can you come help me with something?" The tone I used. God. I still think about that tone, how steady I kept it, how I sounded like a woman who needed help carrying something heavy and not like a woman whose entire chest cavity had turned to ice water. He got up. He came to the kitchen. I moved to the far counter, the one closest to the front hallway, away from my mother-in-law who had transitioned from the birdseed story to something about a HOA meeting and a noise ordinance. I turned my phone face up on the counter and let him read the message. I watched his face. He read it once. Read it again. His jaw tightened. He looked at me, and I could see him doing the same calculation I'd done. Is this real? Is this a prank? Who does this? What do we do? And landing in the same impossible place. He typed back, "How do we know this is real?" The response came in under 30 seconds. Dark blue Silverado has been parked across the street since 6:40. Check your side window without moving the curtain. My husband went very still. Because there was a dark blue Silverado parked across the street. It had been there when his parents pulled in. We'd noticed it the way you notice any unfamiliar car in a residential neighborhood at dusk. A half-second glance, nothing registered, moved on. But it had been there. He looked at me. I looked at him. "Walk with me to the hallway," he said. And his voice was so calm, so deliberately calm, that it scared me more than anything else had so far. We moved toward the front of the house. He barely lifted the edge of the curtain on the narrow window beside the door. Maybe an inch, maybe less. Just enough. The Silverado was still there, and now that I was looking at it, really looking, I could see that there was someone in the driver's seat, just sitting there. Engine off. No phone visible. Just sitting, facing the house. My husband let the curtain fall. We stood in the hallway. My mother-in-law's voice was still floating in from the kitchen. Something about the HOA treasurer now. How he'd been given too much power. You give some people a title and watch what happens. My father-in-law laughed at something on the television. 4 minutes. I didn't know how much of the 4 minutes was left. I typed, "What about the 2 people still inside?" The answer came back, "They'll be fine. We need you and your husband out first. There are officers at the back of the property. Walk out the front, turn left. Go to the neighbor's porch with the green door. Do not run. Do not look at the vehicle." I showed my husband. He read it. He nodded once, slowly. The way he nods when he's made a decision he doesn't entirely like but has accepted as the only option available. "We should go," he said, "and just leave them. They said they'll be fine." He said it quietly, close to my ear. If this is real, we have to trust that. If it's not real, we walk outside and we look like idiots, and that's fine. That's a fine outcome. He was right. I knew he was right. And I hated it, because my mother-in-law was in the other room talking about HOA politics, and she didn't know anything was wrong, and my father-in-law was laughing at the television, and walking out without them felt like the worst kind of abandonment, even though logically, I understood what was being asked of us. I grabbed my phone off the counter. I didn't grab my purse. I didn't grab a jacket. I moved back through the hallway like I was walking through setting concrete. Every step an effort to appear normal, to not rush, to not let my body broadcast what was screaming through my nervous system. My husband stopped in the kitchen doorway. "Hey, Mom. We're going to step out for a second. Forgot something in the car." His mother turned around. "You need help?" "No, we're good. Be right back." That was it. That was the whole conversation. And then we were at the front door, and my husband had his hand on the knob, and he turned to me for just a second. 1 second. And in that second, he looked like himself. Fully himself. And then he opened the door and we walked out. The night air hit me like a wall. I kept my eyes forward. My husband's hand found the small of my back, not holding, just present, just there. And we walked down the front steps and turned left on the sidewalk, and I did not look at the Silverado. I did not look at the Silverado. I looked at the house with the green door, and I put one foot in front of the other. I don't know what I expected. A voice shouting. The sound of a car door. Something. What happened was nothing. Just us walking. The sound of the street at night. Someone's AC unit humming. A dog somewhere. A car passing on the main road a block over. We made it to the green door house in maybe 20 steps, and my husband guided me up onto the porch, and we stood there in the dark, and I finally let myself breathe. 3 seconds later, I heard it. It started with tires. Fast, and from more than one direction, the controlled urgent sound of vehicles that know where they're going. Then voices, short and clipped, the kind that carry authority without volume. I turned, and across the street there were cars I hadn't seen before. They must have been further down the block, out of my sight line. And officers moving toward the Silverado with a speed and precision that made my throat tighten. It wasn't chaotic. That's what surprised me. It was almost terribly organized. Like watching something that had been choreographed, every person knowing their mark. The driver's door of the Silverado opened. I couldn't see everything from the porch, but I saw enough. I saw arms raised. I saw the driver come out slowly. I saw officers on either side of our house now, the back, the side yard, positioned in a way that told me they had been there for longer than 4 minutes. They had been there before we walked out. Before we even sat down to dinner, my husband put his arm around my shoulders and I realized I was shaking. My phone buzzed. "You're safe. An officer will come to you shortly. Don't go back inside yet." I showed my husband. He exhaled. Long, slow, the kind of exhale that's been held in for too long. "Okay," he said. Just that. Okay. We stood on that stranger's porch for what felt like a very long time. The porch light was off. Nobody came to the door. I remember thinking I should probably be more afraid than I was, and then realizing that I was past afraid. I had moved through afraid and come out the other side into something that was just very quiet and very focused. Like the volume on everything had been turned down. An officer came to us maybe 8 minutes later. Younger than I expected, early 30s maybe, in plain clothes with a badge clipped to his belt. He introduced himself, but I couldn't hold on to his name. He asked if we were all right. We said yes. He said the situation was under control. He said, "Your in-laws are fine. There are officers inside with them now." I said, "Do they know what happened?" He said, "They're being informed." That's when it all started to come apart at the seams for me. Not in a dramatic way, not crying or anything like that, just this slow unraveling in my chest, like something that had been pulled very tight was finally being allowed to loosen. My in-laws didn't know. They'd been in the kitchen and then the living room talking about birdseed and HOA politics and the quarterback situation, and none of it had been what it looked like from the outside. We found out more later, not everything and not all at once. These things trickle, they come in pieces, which is its own particular kind of hard, but enough. The man in the Silverado had been watching the house for several days. Not our house specifically. My in-laws' house was his primary target, but he'd followed them to ours that evening. He had a prior record. There was evidence, the officer told us carefully, of planning. He said planning in the way that people use words when they're trying to give you just enough information without giving you the kind that you'll never be able to unknow. The tip had come from someone who recognized the vehicle from a prior incident, a neighbor of my in-laws, 2 streets over, who'd seen the truck and called it in. An officer working the tip had cross-referenced the address and found our location. The text had come from a detective's personal cell because they were moving fast, and it was the most direct line they could establish. That was the part that stayed with me. The detective, whoever she was, had been moving fast, had made a call, and it had been the right call. I thought about that a lot afterward, about the people who make those decisions in real time, with incomplete information, under pressure, and have to live with whatever happens next. About how quickly everything can hinge on something so small. A tip, a recognized license plate, a neighbor who happened to glance out the window at the right moment. About how I stood in my kitchen, stirring gravy, thinking this was exactly what I'd been needing. My in-laws came out of the house about 15 minutes after the officer came to us. My mother-in-law was pale in a way I'd never seen her before. She's one of those people who is constitutionally incapable of being rattled, or at least very good at performing that incapability, and seeing her pale stopped me cold. My father-in-law had his hand on her back the way my husband had his hand on mine. She saw us on the porch and came straight across the grass. Didn't go around the walkway. Straight across, and she put her arms around me and held on. She's not a hugger. We've had 9 years of the polite shoulder pat, the cheek-to-cheek thing at holidays. This was not that. This was real, and she held on for a long time, and I held on back. "You didn't tell us," she said eventually. "They said not to." She pulled back and looked at me. Her eyes were wet. Mine were by then, too. "You walked out and left us in there," she said, and her voice was, I don't know how to describe it, not accusatory, something softer than that. Almost wondering. I know, I said. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. No. She shook her head. She put her hand on my face. This woman who has never once put her hand on my face in 9 years, and she said, "You did the right thing. They told us. What could have happened if—" She stopped, didn't finish it. You did the right thing. I don't cry in front of her. I never have. I cried then. We all ended up in the neighbor's driveway eventually, the 4 of us, waiting while officers finished what they needed to finish. My father-in-law found 2 folding chairs leaning against the neighbor's garage and set them up for the women without being asked. My husband stood next to me with his arm around my shoulders and didn't say much of anything, which is exactly what I needed him to do. At some point, my mother-in-law said quietly, "The casserole is still in there." And my father-in-law said, "The Modelo in the fridge." And somehow we all laughed. It wasn't a big laugh. Not the kind that fills a room. It was small and tired, and more than a little frayed at the edges, but it was real, and it helped. I think about that night a lot. Not obsessively. Not the way I did in the first few weeks, when I kept waking up at 3 a.m., running through the 4 minutes, all the small choices inside of it, all the things that could have gone differently. That part has mostly quieted. What I think about now is smaller. I think about standing in my kitchen with the spoon in my hand, feeling like everything was finally fine. I think about how fast that can change, not in the dramatic way that movies show, the slow, ominous music and the lights flickering, but in the most ordinary way imaginable. A number you don't recognize. A screen lighting up. I think about the detective who texted a stranger from her personal phone because there was no time for anything else, and trusted that the stranger would believe her. I think about the neighbor 2 streets over who glanced out a window at the right moment and didn't talk himself out of making the call. I think about my mother-in-law's hand on my face. None of us can control when the moment comes. The one that asks something of us we didn't know we had. We can't rehearse it. We can't see it coming. All we can do is be in our lives, fully in them, right up until the second we have to decide. And then we decide. That's the whole thing, really. That's everything. We went back inside eventually. The casserole was cold. The Modelo was still in the fridge. My husband reheated what he could while the officers finished up and took what they needed to take, and the 4 of us sat back down at the table and ate, because it was late and we were hungry and because sitting down together felt, in some way I couldn't have articulated, necessary. My father-in-law said grace, which he never does. He kept it short, just a few words about being grateful for the people at the table. He said, "The people at the table." And he looked at my husband and me when he said it, and I had to look down at my plate. We didn't talk about what happened. Not really, not that night. There would be time for that. There would be conversations and follow-up calls and questions I haven't even thought to ask yet. There would be the work of processing something that doesn't process cleanly. But that night, we just ate cold green bean casserole and reheated whatever I'd managed to pull together before everything changed. The football game was still on in the background, the sound turned low. At some point, the quarterback made a pass that even I could tell was good, and my father-in-law made a sound of approval, and the night moved forward the way nights do. 1 minute and then another, until enough of them had passed that we were all a little steadier than we'd been. That's the thing nobody tells you about the moments that change you. They don't end cleanly. There's no credits rolling, no clean cut to black. You just keep going. You eat the casserole. You hear the football game. You look around at the people at your table, and you let yourself feel how much you would have missed them. And then tomorrow comes and you're still here, and that is the whole, entire, extraordinary point. I've thought a lot about what that night actually cost everyone involved, and what it gave back. The neighbor 2 streets over from my in-laws didn't have to make that call. He could have talked himself out of it. He could have thought, "It's probably nothing. It's not my business. I don't want to be the person who cried wolf." That's the easy road, and most people take it without even realizing they made a choice. He didn't. He picked up the phone and said what he saw. And that one decision, that small, inconvenient, slightly uncomfortable decision, is the reason we were all sitting around that table an hour later eating cold casserole. That's what I keep coming back to, not the drama of it, not the part that sounds like a movie when you tell it at a dinner party. The part that humbles me is how ordinary the choices were. A man glancing out a window, a detective moving fast with imperfect information, my husband reading a text from a stranger and deciding in about 15 seconds that we had to trust it. None of those people had certainty. That's the thing about doing the right thing in real time. You almost never get certainty first. You get a small window, a tight deadline, and an incomplete picture. What you do with that is a reflection of who you actually are, not who you think you are when you're comfortable. I think about the version of me who might have put that phone down, who might have thought, unknown number, probably spam, and gone back to stirring the gravy. It's not a hard thing to imagine. I've ignored unknown numbers 100 times. The only difference between that version of that night and what actually happened is that I picked it up. That's it. That's the whole hinge. There's something in that which I find both terrifying and clarifying. We make small choices constantly, all day, barely aware that we're making them. And most of the time, those choices don't matter much either way, but sometimes they do. Sometimes the moment you're in is bigger than it looks, and you don't find out until later, much later, or immediately, which kind of moment it was. What I've taken from it isn't anything dramatic. It's simpler than that. Pay attention. Stay present enough in your own life that when something doesn't feel right, you actually notice. Trust the thing in your chest that says this is real before your brain has had time to rationalize it away. And when someone asks something of you, a stranger, a neighbor, a detective texting from a personal cell at 7 p.m., consider that their urgency might be real and act accordingly. My mother-in-law put her hand on my face that night. 9 years, and she had never done that. I don't think either of us will forget it. What I hope is that we don't need another night like that one to remember what it meant, that the people at the table are the whole point, not the food, not the football game, not whatever was supposed to happen next. Just the people at the table, just that.